Why did you do that? With that question, Burner put the sharp tip of his sword to Ayla's chin. The man looked at her with a searing gaze. His eyes seemed ready to pierce through the girl, even without the sword. Even in these minutes, which looked like they could be her last, the girl was not thinking about death, but about how beautiful this man was. Ayla noted that only now he was looking at her with a gaze like a burning flame. It seemed to her that his eyes were burning now, just as they had at the sight of that woman. The same woman Ayla thought would never get her hands dirty. After all, in Ayla's opinion, all she did was squeeze tears out of herself and make her feel sorry for herself. The sword swung in the air above Ayla. Good and sweet Charlotte. She knew what was about to happen, but she was afraid to see Ayla's massacre firsthand. A man's hand covered her eyes, trying to keep the vulnerable girl safe. The distinctive sound of a sword was heard, and a terrible scream pierced the ears of all who witnessed the scene. The sharp sword swung into the girl's body, causing her unbearable pain. However, the blow was delivered in such a way that it couldn't kill her instantly. Burner had to tell Ayla why she had gotten her hands dirty with magic to harm Charlotte. For her deeds, the entire Mertensia clan to which the girl belonged was destroyed. Ayla looked into the man's eyes. Despite the pain, she had the strength to laugh in his face. Burner looked angrily at Ayla. Her insolence at this moment was a mockery to him. He mercilessly thrust his sword in even deeper. "I curse you," the girl said in despair. "You will be cursed, and you will have no choice but to love me," she added. Burner's gaze was unwavering. It seemed that the girl's words were nothing more than an empty sound to him. "Nonsense!" he objected, and thrust his sword in already fully. Burner approached Charlotte. The girl was shaking and kept repeating how miserable Ayla was. They had promised to end her painlessly. The man was surprised that the girl continued to worry about someone despite her own condition. What is it about Isla and Charlotte that makes them so different? Why was Charlotte being treated well and comforted by everyone while Ayla had to endure these hellish last minutes of her life? "You'll have no choice but to love me," Ayla whispered out of her last strength. The morning light was streaming in through the window. Somewhere a dog was barking so hard it made my ears ring. "Do something already so you don't have to hear that dog barking," Miranda shrieked indignantly as she rose abruptly from the bed. What a stupid dream, thought the girl, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Miranda began her usual morning routine, starting with her morning teeth brushing. All morning she had been wondering why that beautiful girl who had appeared in her dream was dying. Miranda was already standing on public transportation, and her thoughts were still there. That girl from her dream should have lost her life only after all her wishes in this world had been fulfilled. But that couldn't be done. The beautiful red-haired girl was slowly waking up to the chirping of birds outside the window. Her magical green eyes were still sleepy. The girl looked around thoughtfully. A woman's scream was heard in one of the rooms of the manor. "Madam, why are you screaming?" asked someone's concerned voice. Who the girl in her dream was and why she had to die, Miranda remembered only after she got here. The people living in this place called her that, Ayla Mertensia, a rare villain. But they were all wrong. To be more precise, Ayla is Miranda Humphrey, who has moved into the body of the villain from the novel Mistress Lily. She is also the author of the novel. But wait a minute, Miranda wrote it 10 years ago. Ayla, meanwhile, was in some other place. A man and a woman saw Ayla and immediately started discussing her. The woman was surprised that the same clothes could make such a different impression on different people. The man laughed and answered her with something witty. Ayla's dark past was passing right in front of her in real time. Ayla heard all the discussions about her outfit. Some said that her outfit was exactly the same as the other ladies, while others said that they were no match for each other. Yes, there was another girl in the hall wearing the same dress as Ayla's. All the eyes of the audience were admiring her appearance, while simultaneously mocking the way the same dress looked on Ayla. So who's the lady? Rumor had it that this was her first time out, but she already stood out a lot. She was like a lily, so pure and delicate. Like a lily, Ayla slapped her forehead with these thoughts. Compared to her, there were some people who looked the exact opposite. That's what everyone was gossiping about, throwing mocking glances at Ayla. The worst part was that Ayla knew ahead of time what they would say next. And next they will say that these two girls are completely different, as if a saint and a witch. But no, happily ever after, Ayla thought to herself as she moved on to another place. Ah, just one thought and she's already at Duke Mertentius's estate. Sinking her head into her pillow, Ayla thought about why she was the villain in this particular novel, and she understood why. In her mind, she recalled moments from Miranda's past. People at work benefited from her kindness and dependability. Often she did not do her job for nothing. Miranda was always being asked to borrow money, and she couldn't say no. Even her parents, complaining about the lack of money and inability to pay for their younger children's school fees, forced Miranda to sacrifice herself and look for another part-time job. Miranda in Ayla's body could now only remember how she had lived like a gullible fool. The girl turned her head and something caught her attention. A crest with two crossed swords refreshed one picture in her mind. As she looked at the tip of the sword, she immediately recalled the very moment of Ayla's execution. The villainess's last words echoed in her head. "I can't die like this!" cried Ayla, jumping up from the bed. The maids in the room shuddered at her sharp cry. Ayla decided that from now on she would not live as a villain. The girl looked around the library with curiosity. There were a lot of books that didn't seem to have been touched at all. The girl thought about whether it was so necessary to meet the main characters and suffer. Ayla had enough of everything. Money, power, and honor. What else do you need for a good life? But the most important thing Ayla had was her beautiful looks. These thoughts made the girl smile. The maid shuddered for some reason at this smile from her mistress. However, Ayla realized that in this case, her looks didn't matter because of her status as a villainess. Being Miranda, the girl dreamed so much to start living as an unemployed person with a huge amount of money, and now finally this dream has come true. Not the right level, someone said suddenly. Ayla was distracted from her musings, and with the book in her hands, she staggered backward. Unfortunately, even the atmosphere in Ayla's family was far from ideal. Her father, Duke Vincent Mertensia, was indifferent to his daughter and paid little attention to her. Aslan Mertensia is her older brother. Ayla also had a bad relationship with him. Now he caught her off guard with his sharp and unexpected phrase. Then the brother, like the wind, walked quickly past his sister, trying not to even look in her direction. Ha! Ayla was sure her brother had said, "not the right level," upon seeing the books in her hands. The girl took it lightly. Showing him a scolding sign in return, she thought it was a perfect brother-sister relationship. When Aslan left, Ayla opened one of the books in anticipation. It was the writer Rinte, the best writer she had ever read. Flipping through the pages, she asked the maid thoughtfully, "The collector's edition of the Rinte writer I ordered comes tomorrow, right?" "Yes, it is," replied the maid. Ayla was very pleased with this news. Rinte's writer is a genius, and Miranda included him in her story too. Yes, when she first read his novels, she discovered a whole new world, and that world was beautiful. "I want to kidnap him," the girl muttered to herself. Her gaze suddenly fell on the window. Wow, what an interesting phenomenon. "Falingai?" said Ayla cryptically, looking up at the sun. Falingia is the name of the total solar eclipse in the novel Mistress Lily. The Empire of Lete, in which its action unfolds, boasts of its imperial power. And though it's called the Lands of the Shining Sun, on which night never descends, something is hidden in the shadows of this story. In the 5th century, right during a total solar eclipse, Killian, famed as an evil mage with the worst reputation in the entire world, destroyed an entire kingdom in one single night. Because of this, everyone in the empire fears Falingea, who covers the sun, the symbol of the emperor. In fact, Miranda just wanted to call the phenomenon something cool. The thought made Ayla squirm smugly on the bed. "Writer Rinte's collector's edition is coming today, isn't it?" the girl asked the maid again. "Can you take it to my room?" Ayla added happily, rubbing her hands together. The maid perplexedly explained that the books Ayla had ordered this time were to be delivered tomorrow morning. What do you mean tomorrow? The girl was sure that just yesterday she had spoken to the maid, and the maid had said that the books would arrive today. That's very strange. The maid shudderingly admitted that she had said nothing of the sort yesterday. Oh, she's holding today's paper. Perhaps this is what we need to clear the air. Ayla snatched the paper from the girl's hands, lightning fast. Well, today is the 13th. Falling a day? Wait a minute, but that was yesterday. At the same time, someone's male hand was nervously tapping his fingers. In a darkened setting, someone was holding a secret meeting. In a large hall stood people dressed in cassocks. The atmosphere was gloomy and austere. One guy in a cassock approached the man sitting on the throne, who kept tapping his fingers on the armrest of his throne. "Louis?" The man addressed the lad. The guy responded to the address by bowing his head honorably before him. The man asked Luis if he knew what déjà vu was. Luis replied that of course he knew. Luis understood it as feeling as if you had experienced something like this before. The boy smilingly gave his opinion on the matter. The man hesitated. It was obvious that something was troubling him. He looked puzzled at the eclipse of the sun. Then he admitted that today, that very sense of déjà vu is felt very clearly and unpleasantly. So it turns out that Ayla had gone back a day? Thinking about it, the girl wondered aloud about the limited edition of best-selling writer Rinte's music box. The maid replied expectantly that it would be delivered tomorrow morning. Ayla covered herself with a blanket and said goodnight to the maid. The girl ducked her head under the blanket, going to sleep. The maid noticed in amazement that her mistress had just woken up. However, when Ayla opened her eyes again the next day, what awaited her was not a collector's edition of writer Rinte at all. "Oh my God, what's going on? Is such a thing possible?" The girl read the fresh newspaper and tossed it aside in surprise. Ayla jumped up, her whole appearance showing that she was very, very angry. The servant girls were frightened by their mistress's appearance and mood, so they began to apologize. One of the maids fell to her knees in tears in front of Ayla. She apologized and said they deserved to die. The second also fell to her knees and begged mistress to let them live, saying something about her little sister. God, all this sobbing and suffering was driving the girl into a frenzy. Darkness, Ayla thought, holding her head. All the servant girls were kneeling in front of her and tearfully begging for forgiveness from the bewildered Ayla. This is too unrealistic. That's exactly what was going through the girl's mind at that moment. Though it would be strange for her to search for reality after finding herself in her own novel. Ayla bit her lip nervously. The problem seems to have been ignorance of the true cause. Could this be a sign saying she should stop her reclusive life? But no, even Ayla, or rather Miranda in Ayla's body, thought it was utter nonsense. Trying to distract herself from the sobbing and trembling maids, Ayla reassured herself that probably the manager of this world would set it right soon. In the meantime, she should take it easy. She could enjoy the life of a rich, unemployed person to the fullest. Like reading all of Rinte's novels again. She also had an endless supply of money, no matter how much she spent. Next day, Duke Mertensius's estate. God, it's the same thing again. "Mistress, I'm sorry, it's our fault," the maid apologized with a bow. Again, the same second maid sobbed and said they deserved to die. And just like yesterday, another servant girl begged not to be killed and let them live, trying to tell something about her little sister. The next day was exactly the same as the previous day. Ayla began to feel like she was slowly going crazy. Day after day, the same thing was repeated. The same words, like a broken record, sounded day after day. The girl had already memorized every word of every maid, every movement they made, everything down to the smallest detail. Ayla had been very angry at first, but now she smiled indifferently. As long as she didn't really lose her mind. The only thing on her mind was that she would probably never get that coveted Rinta book again. Not only did she relocate, but this time loop. That Ayla continued to breathe at all in her reanimated dark past was only thanks to the writer Rinte. But she must, by all means, move on to the next day. For 10 days, the girl went outside and tried walking on the road, but nothing helped. Ayla guessed what she should have done. But the girl was unfazed by these speculations. Would she really have to meet the main characters after all? She's like Lily. Ayla's mind was spinning. Quite like a saint and a witch, echoed voices from the bookish past. For crying out loud, the girl shouted in frustration, slamming the book shut. I'm going to go crazy like this, Ayla told herself. The girl shoved her book away, and unfortunately hit a frightened maid with it. Oh, she should have gotten here at such a bad time. Ayla stood there confused. The maid cried out. The book hit her head, shattering her forehead. Blood trickled down her young, snow-white skin. The girl trembled, and with tears in her eyes was afraid to even look at her mistress. Ayla herself was astonished at what had happened. She stood there for a few seconds, and then held out her hand to the maid. Ayla shuddered at what she had just done herself. The maid fell to her knees and sobbed, then began to beat her bows to the floor. She said she was sorry, and begged her mistress not to kill her. Ayla stood there puzzled by the whole thing. No matter how hard Ayla tried to stop the girl's wailing, the maid kept saying that she was bad, and that it was all Dobiella's fault. Ayla asked the girl to calm down. Meanwhile, in a completely different place, someone was speculating about life as an ability to anticipate. It was the mysterious man on the throne. He claimed he had no such ability, though he was quite perceptive. Luis wondered if it was possible that something unusual would happen today. "I think I was going to kill you," the man said, looking at the boy with a grim look. Fright froze on the boy's face. It seemed to be the first time Louis had ever seen him so angry. He didn't understand what could have happened, because everything had been normal until yesterday. Luis decided that the gentleman could use some calming down, so he slipped some kind of potion into his teacup. "Sir, would you like to have a cup of tea to find peace in your heart?" Luis obligingly offered. Throwing a baleful glance at the lad, the man asked if he was interested in finding out why the gentleman so earnestly wanted to kill him. "Why? No, but what did I do wrong?" asked Louis confusedly, and immediately he tripped over something and flew forward, dropping his teacup. The cup slipped out of Louis's hands. However, he deftly grabbed it on the fly without falling. True, most of the tea generously spilled out in a hot stream. The men in cassocks looked at the boy with fear, anticipating the Lord's reaction. As if on cue, they all turned toward Luis at the same time, excitement in their gazes. One of the men in cassocks suddenly coughed. The others coughed in solidarity. Luis stood in confusion. The hot drink spilled right on the gentleman's pants. The man jumped up sharply and said loudly that that was the reason he wanted to kill Luis. Someone asked for ice, and someone else demanded a change of underwear and pants. The men in cassocks took turns suggesting solutions to the problem. One said he needed a towel, another suggested drying everything with magic. The master realized that all this was not just déjà vu. He knew for a fact that this situation had been repeated many times before. The gentleman laughed nervously. The power to control time should be entirely in God's hands. Now it seemed as if he had broken the long silence and was acting personally. Has there really come a man whom God loves so much that he is even willing to break the laws of cause and effect? These thoughts puzzled the dark-haired gentleman very much. "I suppose it would be etiquette to wring his neck personally," thought the man. At the same time, a maid was still sobbing on her knees in front of Mistress Ayla. The mistress was still unable to stop her wild cries. It was the maid who fainted after Ayla's friendly smile. If she apologized, the maid might die inadvertently, Ayla worried. With those thoughts, Ayla clapped the girl on the shoulder and asked her to finally stop. But the maid seemed to start sobbing even louder. Poor lady's eardrums. God, the yelling was getting to be exhausting for Ayla, and she frowned. "If you don't shut up, I'll eat you," she blurted out even to herself. The maid covered her mouth with her hand in a daze. Ayla sat down next to the frightened girl. "I'll eat it," she said, just the first thing that came to mind. Ayla mentally wondered why she kept referring to herself in the third person. It was an unusual character in her novel, and it wasn't even plagiarism. Ayla gingerly reached out to touch the girl's forehead. You'll probably still have a scar," Ayla remarked excitedly. She wanted to say sorry, but cut herself off halfway through, remembering how the girl had fainted at Ayla's smile. So Ayla changed her mind about apologizing and instead said, "Are you crazy? You'll leave marks on the floor." The maid sobbed and started to cry again. "Dobiella is very stupid. How dare I dirty the floor of your room?" "Please don't eat me, please don't eat me," Dobiella begged. Ayla thought to herself that she wouldn't go near that madwoman now. It was getting gloomy outside. Ayla woke up in her bed and, rubbing her eyes, asked what time it was. She was told it was 1 o'clock. "Why is it so gloomy? Can the weather really change in a loop?" the girl thought in amazement. "The book you ordered has arrived," she was suddenly informed. Ayla jumped up abruptly. This was very unexpected news over the past endlessly identical days. Stunned by this news, the lady was hurriedly handed the long-awaited box. "What?" The question managed to run through Ayla's mind many times as she opened the box. The girl couldn't believe that this long-awaited event had finally happened. Wasn't it a dream? Wow, it's the limited edition of the best-selling book, The Music Box by Rinte. Ayla burst into tears with happiness. The girl's emotions at that moment could not be conveyed in words. She was jubilant with happiness, jumping, dancing, and filled the space around her with joyful cries. "What is this outrage?" Someone's words snapped to shatter the girl's exuberant joy. Oh my God, it's her brother Aslan. Always such a bad time. He appeared as if on purpose to spoil such a beautiful and long-awaited moment. Aslan looked at his sister with disdain. "Our father is calling us," he stated succinctly. What's that for?" thought Ayla. Sitting at her father's side, the girl fidgeted nervously in her seat. It was because she had no idea what to expect. Ayla flinched at every sound. Even the clinking of the cup on the table sent a pulse through her body, making her tense. What's going on here? The awkward silence seemed to drag on a bit. Vincent Mertensia looked at his daughter with a stern look. He said that he had been informed about Ayla's behavior lately. The father emphasized that his daughter was behaving as if she had been replaced by another person. "Don't you make up false illnesses to avoid going to the aristocratic meetings you loved so much? And buying yourself books that you couldn't read a line of before?" Vincent asked, as if piercing his daughter with such unexpected questions. Ayla thought in horror, would this be the end of her carefree life? Her father suddenly announced that he had decided to appoint someone to tutor his daughter. Ayla was taken aback by the news, and she asked her father what he meant. "Come in." Vincent Mertensia dryly invited someone in. "I guess we'll have to start our training in positions," came the stranger's voice from behind Ayla's back. Then he put his hands on her shoulders. With an insistent motion, he pulled the girl's shoulders back, thus leveling her back. The father told his daughter to say hello. Vincent also added that this is the person who will be training Ayla from this day forward. Ayla now has a tutor and a personal butler. The young man looked at the girl with a piercing gaze and said, "Nice to meet you, mistress. From today, I will be in charge of—" The man cut short his phrase. He added that he meant to say his name was Sebastian. Ayla thought to herself, that was a pretty standard name for a butler. The girl was still a little perplexed at what was happening. Vincent Mertensia said he had high hopes for Sebastian because he was the second son of Viscount Agat's family, and as we know, their family had a very deep tradition. Sebastian bowed and assured him that Mr. Vincent could rely on him. "This man, who is he?" said Ayla, lost in speculation, and suddenly called out to Sebastian. "Why don't you take off your cape?" She addressed her new acquaintance. The father looked at his daughter in surprise. He wondered aloud what Ayla was talking about. Vincent emphasized that Sebastian looked like a perfectly dressed butler, from his straight posture to his perfectly fitting clothes. He didn't see a single flaw in Sebastian. But that wasn't it, was it? The girl sensed something wrong was going on. This unusual situation worried the girl to the point of trembling. Perhaps it was only to Ayla that this man looked different. Out of the blue, the girl felt an intense excitement. Ayla noticed that her gaze became unfocused for a while. In addition, she had described the man's appearance incorrectly. Silencing her thoughts, out loud, Ayla said, "No, now that I've looked at you again, you really do seem like the right person for me by all criteria. It seems the reputation of the Agat family has no flaws, haha," the girl added, trying to make her tone casual. In her thoughts, she speculated that it could have been hypnosis, and the new acquaintance could have been a mage. It was strange that his magic didn't work only on Ayla, but even great magicians couldn't use hypnotism when they wanted to. Ayla pondered, but Sebastian smiled enigmatically. "In that case, shall we go, mistress?" he invited the girl, offering her his hand. He also added that they will have plenty of time to learn everything before the Harvest Festival dance to be held at the Imperial Palace. "Even if the same day doesn't happen over and over again," Sebastian said, leaning over to the girl and looking her straight in the eyes. "Ah, is there really another person who knows about the time loop?" Ayla was frightened by this stranger. Even more frightening was the fact that he was suddenly looming over her, so much so that she had to press her back against the wall. Sebastian blocked the girl with his arms on either side, as if he was afraid she might run away. "Would you mind closing your eyes for a while?" he whispered right in her ear. Ayla obeyed him without understanding why. The man ran his hand across the girl's forehead and she felt a sharp pain. It seemed that he had wounded her a little to get blood. Sebastian suddenly started saying something inaudible, like some kind of magic incantation. Along with that, he was making strange movements with his hand. It really did seem to be witchcraft, and it wasn't particularly pleasant. With a sharp movement of his hand, Sebastian removed Ayla's hair, which was in his way. There was blood on the girl's cheek. With both hands, he wrapped his arms around Ayla's delicate neck. The girl shuddered, but she couldn't resist it. Ayla coughed. Could it be a sorcerer? She thought frantically as she looked at the man. Suddenly, a bright fire of 1,000 sparks flashed right in front of the girl's face. God, what did all this even mean? Before she realized what was happening, new shocks swept through the girl's mind. Meanwhile, in one of the dark alleys of the town, someone's male voice addressed the lady, admonishing her not to walk alone in such places. "What will you do if you are caught by some dangerous man?" he added threateningly. The young prince, who was passing nearby, heard these words. He froze in anticipation. "What shall we do, your highness?" his companion asked the prince. Prince Burner put on his hood and told him to just ignore it. Suddenly, a woman's voice called desperately for help. The prince froze for a moment and listened. Could it be that woman again? He thought, and with a confident step he walked quickly toward the place from which the voices had been heard. "Your Highness!" His companion tried to stop the prince. However, there was no stopping him. In a matter of seconds, the man was already in the right place. The beautiful blonde girl seemed to be in danger. Several disreputable men intended to do her no good, and apparently she was in no way alone. A few deft swings of the sword and the insolence are gone. The girl was very frightened by such a sight, while the prince looked at his bloody sword. He looked at the girl questioningly, and stated that her being in such places unguarded for the umpteenth time looked suspicious already. Either the girl thought she was priceless, or she was doing it intentionally. "I'm sorry for making you worry," she apologized tearfully. This girl's name was Charlotte, and she tried to explain that it was the first time she had left her land and come to the capital. She had gotten so carried away on her walk that she had wandered into this alleyway without realizing it. Charlotte was frightened. Admitting that she was really scared, the girl suddenly lost her balance. One clumsy movement and she fell right into Prince Burner's arms. Oh, how unexpected. The prince was thrilled at this unexpected closeness. He wondered with surprise if Charlotte was afraid of him after he had just killed people. But the girl's actions were more eloquent than any words. She laid her head on the prince's breast and stood there for some time. Burner remarked aloud that it was the first time he had ever seen a woman like her. Meanwhile, something interesting was going on at Vincent Mertentius's father's estate. Sebastian finally let Ayla go, noting that she couldn't seem to die from it. Yes, the unusual thing was that she wasn't affected by his charms. Surprised that sorcerers still existed, Ayla asked Sebastian why he wanted to kill her. Was it because of the noose? Hinges? The man interjected, puzzled. Ayla clarified that she was referring to the repeatedly repeated day. Sebastian replied that the girl was right, and it had been a long time since he had looked for someone, being so sure he was doing the right thing. The man angrily added that Ayla had caused one very unpleasant day of his to repeat itself several times already. He then stated that the mistress must somehow comfort the distressed Sebastian. The man unceremoniously took Ayla by the chin. Yes, Ayla was definitely human. However, Sebastian was once again convinced that the girl was not affected by magic. No matter how hard he tried, the girl remained intact, as if something was protecting her. "Magic?" questioned Ayla in surprise. Sebastian wondered aloud at this reaction from the girl. Reacting like it's the first time you've seen something like this. If you're from the nobility, you must be exposed to magic often. He glanced at Ayla suspiciously. That's where you're wrong, dear friend." Ayla covered her mouth with her hand so that she wouldn't accidentally say too much. How strange that this person can use completely opposite magic and spells to each other. But it should be impossible. "I wonder who you are," Sebastian whispered right in the girl's ear. Ayla flinched. Without distancing himself from the girl, Sebastian also noticed that Ayla seemed to be getting a lot of love. Sebastian swept the girl's entire body with reserve energy, as if poisoning Ayla's life and herself. Reserve was the name of the only deity worshipped in the Lete Empire. However, it was nothing more than a symbol in the novel. But this deity, does it really exist? Ayla wondered. Ayla looked questioningly at Sebastian. She was very interested in hearing about the reserve from him. It was unexpected for Sebastian to hear this very question from Ayla. "And this is you asking me?" The man waved his hand with those words, and a lacy cloud of smoke appeared above her. Sebastian mused aloud that the girl was now proving the existence of this deity with her whole body. Ayla wondered when her body had suddenly become capable of such a thing. That's odd. The girl wasn't affected by the spells. Although Ayla is a hideous villain, she's just an ordinary lady without any abilities or powers. Not only can't she create time loops and get rid of the effects of spells, but there can't be any god marks on her body. This seems to have started after Miranda moved to Ayla. Is this all happening because of a deity's love for Ayla? Did the loop start because of the reservoir too? Ayla asked the mage. The one explained that only a higher power could control time, but even a deity had to be careful in disrupting the flow of time. But the girl was very curious. Then what about repeating the same day? In the girl's opinion, the fact that one day kept repeating over and over again spoke of the incredible efforts of this deity. Ayla swallowed her saliva nervously. The girl suddenly began to remember moments from those past identical days, how day after day she read the same book. Her anger and how angry she was at all the things that were happening to her. The sobbing maid was not to be forgotten either. In terms of the difference between the last day and the ones that repeated, it appeared that Ayla had acted like a villain, and then the loop stopped. It followed that the deity wanted Ayla to act as described in the novel. It turns out that the deity only needed the girl to live like the villainous Ayla in the novel. He also wants Ayla dead. Wow, was all Sebastian could say to such musings from the girl. Isn't that a real curse? Ayla asked tearfully. Sebastian looked puzzled. Ayla realized that she hadn't even asked for a repeat of that day, and it wasn't her wish. She just wanted an ordinary, unremarkable life. However, the deity acted extremely unkindly. The girl stated that she was sure that the deity had cursed her, or just wanted to torture her. Sebastian chuckled at these assumptions of Ayla's. Cursed, cursed. He echoed her words. Ayla twitched at such a sinister laugh. Sebastian adjusted his cloak and noted that he even felt sorry for Reserve after the girl's words. Is this one-sided love on the part of the deity? He wondered ironically. Ayla didn't know what to say to that, and looked at Sebastian with surprised eyes. She was curious to hear his opinion about all this. The mage scratched the back of his head, and suddenly asked if Ayla had heard the voice of the deity. What did that have to do with anything? Sebastian rephrased his question, asking if the girl had received any revelation. Ayla stated that she did not receive any such thing. Sebastian had expected just such an answer from the girl. After all, he knew that this deity never answered people's prayers. The magician said that people ask the Reserve to hear and fulfill their wishes. But what kind of irresponsible god is this? Thought Ayla. The mage smiled, seeing the puzzlement on the girl's face. And yet I like you very much, he confessed suddenly. Tell me, what do you want? Sebastian asked, holding out his hand to the girl. I will fulfill absolutely everything, he added mysteriously in a confident voice. Ayla looked at her unusual new acquaintance with interest and surprise. What? Questioned Ayla in surprise. You get God's love, and I'm disappointed in his will, Sebastian pronounced, looking straight into her eyes. Besides, you seem to really hate the Reserve. I think we can be very good partners, he added, and extended his hand to the girl again. Ayla noted irritably that she was the opposite of saying that she wasn't getting any love from the deity. Sebastian agreed to call it just interest. There were two people standing in the middle of the large corridor. Ayla, a beautiful girl with long red hair, and Sebastian, a tall, handsome brunette. Oh, what a couple they would make. Sebastian noted that even if Ayla wasn't receiving love from a deity, he was still sure that opposing the fate he was destined for was the road they would take against the god's will. Ayla thought for a moment. I suggest you sign a contract, the mage said suddenly. Let's betray this deity together, the man suggested with a sinister smile. He explained that it would be a simple contract. Ayla would find the life she wanted to live, and Sebastian could get rid of his hatred. Someone like me could easily ruin the image of a god, he whispered conspiratorially in the girl's ear. The sorcerer is a monster who sucks the happiness out of people, and the one who had to live the life of a villain and die was Ayla Mertensia. The girl clutched the hem of her dress nervously. She had to make a decision, sign a contract with the devil or die as a villain. And will you be able to stop the noose? Ayla asked the question that troubled her the most. Sebastian stated that it would be difficult, but they should be able to pull the root of this out in a completely unexpected direction. The man smiled and wondered if Ayla would still be signing. How can I sign a contract with a man I know nothing about? Not his name or face, Ayla asked angrily. Sebastian was surprised by her question. Ayla was not confused, however, and remarked that Sebastian Agate must be just a man's alias. And it can't be your real face after all, the girl added. Sebastian replied that she was right about the name, but he didn't understand what Ayla meant by real face. Ayla blushed and was genuinely surprised that his face wasn't fake. Sebastian suddenly took the girl's hand in his own. Ayla wondered if he was going to use sorcery again. The man reminded her that his charms didn't work on the girl anyway. "It's not an illusion," Sebastian said, and Ayla's hand touched his face. "Ah, but his face is so beautiful, it's hard to believe it's real." Ayla was petrified by this unexpected touch on his skin. Sebastian told her to just breathe. Ayla almost died from the emotions that overwhelmed her. After a few seconds, she asked his name. "Killian," the man replied proudly. Ayla's eyes widened with either horror or surprise. Ayla's eyes widened in surprise or horror. Killian is an evil sorcerer? No, but why is he suddenly calling out the name of a man who lived before the 5th century? Maybe they just have the same name, but it's not easy to live in society with a name like that. Ayla thought it was like living on Earth with the last name Hitler. Sebastian asked again what the girl's answer would be. "Okay," she replied simply. The man was surprised at how easily she agreed. Ayla thought for a moment. Before Killian showed up, she was so lonely she wanted to run away. She decided that if someone like a god was going to run her life at will, Ayla would have no choice but to obey him. "Let's sign the contract," she said firmly. And extending her hand to Sebastian, she added that they needed to deal with this stupid deity properly. Sebastian thanked the girl, placing her favorite book right on top of her head. Soon he was standing in front of the girl with a watch in his hands, and he declared that he would let her read the book that was on her head if she stood like that for another 10 minutes. Ayla wanted to get rid of that corset at least, but Sebastian wouldn't let her. Standing there in that constricting outfit and with a book on her head, Ayla thought about wearing the same nonsense on the main character of her novel. But most of all, Ayla was covered in goosebumps because Sebastian could tell at a glance what she treasured most. The girl wondered how Sebastian knew she was an ardent fan of the book. She assumed that the man had simply used hypnosis on the maid and was thus able to find out this information. "Hypnosis?" he asked in surprise. Ayla explained that she was referring to the day they'd first met, when Sebastian had tricked her father into thinking he was the butler. The man countered that he had only walked confidently through the front door, and her father had already decided he was the butler. Killian explained that it was more like a charm than hypnosis. Hypnosis only controlled the brain, but by using his ability, the man could pull out desires hidden deep in the inner world and satisfy them. Desires hidden deep within the inner world? Ayla said those words in her mind and it suddenly hit her. It turns out that her cold father Vincent suddenly dreamed deep down that his daughter would have a teacher and a butler. It seems that his coldness was ostensible, and somewhere in his heart he was worried about his daughter. Because of this, Ayla now has to learn the rules of etiquette at an accelerated pace. However, there was still something the girl missed when she agreed to the contract. Accepting Killian's offer meant that she and he would be spending a great deal of time together to exchange information. And this was after he had already been named her teacher and personal butler. Ayla's thoughts were interrupted by Killian's voice. He sarcastically remarked that it was not only taking care of herself that was important in the life of a girl like her. "Have you given up on your existence, used to living like a beast?" Killian asked. Touching the girl's back, he emphasized that not only did she lack all etiquette, which was as important to aristocrats as air, but Ayla's posture left much to be desired. "It's like you've been living in another world. Your reaction centered on the wrong thing, much less your unusual way of speaking," the man added. Ayla was starting to get a little nervous at his words. Killian nevertheless continued that even without knowing the state of affairs in this world, it was enough to be born on this earth to simply shiver at the mere word spell and ask for God's favor. But more importantly, what really surprised the man was that she let his name pass her ears without expressing any concern. The girl disagreed with this statement. Ayla said she knew that Killian was the name of an evil sorcerer who had destroyed an entire country 500 years ago. But was she really supposed to shake when she heard that name? After all, she thought it was only a man with the same name. Killian emphasized in thought, usually people couldn't even say that name out loud. The man liked the fervor with which Ayla criticized that deity. However, he couldn't help but mention how strange this girl seemed to him. Finally he announced that the interminable 10 minutes had passed. Ayla took the book off her head with relief. During that time, it felt like she was holding a brick on her head instead of a book. Slamming his watch shut, Killian said that Ayla might as well not say who she was, since he would eventually find out for himself anyway. The girl hugged the book and pressed it to her chest as if it were the greatest jewel. Nervously swallowing her saliva, Ayla thought about the fact that as soon as he found out that she was a writer, Ayla would immediately be overtaken by death. Killian seems to have an extreme hatred for the deity here, but the writer is also considered somewhat of a god who created this world, isn't he? Suddenly, there was a knock at the door and Mistress was summoned. Ayla looked questioningly at the door and stood up to see what was wanted of her. "Killian, just a minute," she said, and as she headed for the door, she stumbled clumsily, stepping her shoe on the hem of her dress. The girl did not keep her balance and should have fallen, but a strong male hand literally picked her up in flight. Killian deftly held Ayla up, preventing her from falling. "If it's so hard for you to walk alone, I guess I have a lot more to teach you. Don't you, Mistress?" the man asked, holding Ayla gently. Ayla thought that his attempt to support her had gone on too long. The girl's heart thumped frantically. "Let me go," she said, removing his hands from her waist. Killian obediently removed his hands, and Ayla immediately went to open the door. "I knew you'd be with your new butler, teacher," the uninvited guest enthused. "Ah, she showed up again," Ayla thought grudgingly. It's worth mentioning that the Mertenzia family had two types of servants. The first were those who were always apologizing for everything, weeping and wailing, and begging for mercy, and not to be killed. The second was a small number of sycophants trying to take something away. The maid, meanwhile, with a playfully sweet smile, was delighted that her beautiful mistress would now also look smarter. She also added that she was worried about Mistress. After all, now those who had previously called Ayla a witch might start looking at her. Oh God, what kind of nonsense is she talking about? She knew it was ingratiation after all. Whether they put a teacher on her or not, Ayla had always been stupid. Ayla Mertenzia stayed away from studies and was uneducated. In addition, she was quick to give in to her emotions and started acting with her body and mouth faster than her head. Along with that, she behaved the same way upon hearing simple praise. Now Ayla was annoyed at the ridiculous compliments which had been drawn on her ears. The maid was admiring the hairs on her mistress's head. She complimented her skin, saying it looked incredibly white and soft as silk at a time when Ayla was sweating and realizing herself that she didn't look her best right now. The maid didn't forget to express her delight at the incredible color of her mistress's eyes, emphasizing that she had never seen anyone with eyes as fantastic as Ayla's in her life. Having finally expressed her endless flattery, the girl opened a catalog with dresses. She announced that she had picked out dresses for Ayla that would be perfect for a beautiful girl like Mistress. "If you look at this catalog from the Luciana sewing shop..." Ayla didn't really want to listen to the girl, and all her words now sounded like blah 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 to her. Around the simple and illiterate Ayla, who tolerated even such talk, were gathered such hypocrites who betrayed or used her. She, on the other hand, did not suspect anything, and just accepted everything in a kind of dazed state. The girl who now stood before Ayla would betray her and play the biggest role in destroying the Mertenzia family. And it was Ayla's personal maid named Sophia. She was now rubbing her eyes resentfully, not understanding why her mistress was not reacting to her in any way. "Is it because of that cream dress I picked out for you earlier that I've now become of no use to you?" she asked. Ayla wanted to avoid whatever was in store for her, she thought, and twiddled her fingers nervously, trying to figure out what to do. However, as she thought, Ayla couldn't just push Sophia away like that. She tried to calm the maid and asked her not to cry. It's times like this that bring back memories of gullible, silly Miranda Humphrey. Meanwhile, Sophia continued to wail, blaming everything on that unknown lady of the Viscount's family, Charlotte Angelo. "If only she had not been there, you and His Highness the Prince could have been a couple made in heaven," she cried indignantly. At such loud and unexpected words, Ayla recoiled back. Her heel caught on something again, but this time the girl held herself back, grabbing the edge of Killian's hoodie. She really was quite clumsy. Ayla glanced guiltily at her teacher. Killian smiled. "I suppose that lady has acted unkindly towards the mistress?" he asked, looking at Sophia. The maid confirmed his words, adding that the butler must know everything by now as well. Sophia explained that she was referring to the mistress's incredible crush on His Highness the Prince. Ayla smiled broadly. "Is that so?" snorted Killian. Ayla objected that it wasn't. Sophia, on the other hand, argued that everything had gone wrong because that girl had interfered. Inside Ayla, writer Miranda was outraged. She knew that Burner was destined to be with Charlotte. Sophia suddenly cried, and wiping her tears with a handkerchief, asked her mistress to stop torturing herself over this wound of one-sided love. Ayla was mentally perplexed at how things had suddenly turned out this way. "Ah, so that's it," Killian said, smiling again. Ayla flinched. Sophia then expressed her conclusion about it aloud. She said that this was why Ayla read books in the corner of the room like a wreck every day to cope with her worries, and sobbed every day. Resentment was eating Ayla from the inside out. "But you don't have to worry anymore if you have these dresses," the maid concluded, jabbing her finger at the catalog. Sophia began to talk passionately about the latest in the fashion world, and what is being worn now, and what is no longer relevant. The girl noticed that dresses with the back of the skirt gathered at the figure would be popular this season. Ayla looked at the catalog and tried to remember something. "Yay, I remembered. In the novel Mistress Lily, this design was developed by the main character Charlotte. In the novel, Charlotte was the daughter of a viscount and lived on the outskirts of the village. Therefore, unlike the rest of the nobility, she grew up helping with farming. To keep her clothes from getting dirty, she walked with her dress raised. Later, she added her idea to the skirt falling down the back, creating a new design that way. Burner, however, discovered this and recreated Charlotte's design. With the help of the world's best tailor, Pollen, the girl's idea was realized. Soon, this design became popular, and all aristocrats, without exception, wore it at balls and evenings. And Ayla was one of them. On one such evening, Ayla spilled wine from her glass. Oh, and how come she spilled it all over Charlotte's dress? Charlotte then assured Ayla that everything was fine, however, the dress was ruined. Everyone present immediately began discussing the incident, whispering Ayla was a witch. People were murmuring and whispering about the fact that it was Pollen's only dress in the world. That evening, Burner comforted Charlotte. He said they could always make a new dress, no matter how many they might need. The prince led the girl away, explaining that she had nothing to worry about, because he had paid for the outfit. Ayla stood with an empty glass and looked after them. "Your Highness," she called out to the prince. He turned his head slightly, giving Ayla a glance. "Ah, that's about how it went down. Back in the days when Miranda was writing Mistress Lily, she was a bit obsessed with dresses. I guess that's why this story is here. She didn't know it was so uncomfortable to wear dresses. Now that she was in Ayla's body, she could feel the benefits of wearing dresses. In any case, at the next ball, which will be held very soon, Ayla will have to act like a villain again. If the girl doesn't follow it, the loop will start again. And if it follows?" Ayla clearly understood what would happen in that case. "You seem to be thinking hard, mistress," Killian addressed her. He realized that the girl didn't like these dresses, despite being called the newest. Ayla decided that now she would do what she wanted to do. With those thoughts, she grabbed Killian by the collar of his hoodie. The man looked at Ayla in bewilderment. The girl drew the teacher closer, and in her ear confessed that she thought these dresses were quite unsuitable for herself. Moreover, there seemed too many to choose from. "Economical, a fine answer, worthy of a duke's daughter." Killian complimented the girl and smiled. Ayla suddenly felt uncomfortable. Killian abruptly pulled away from the girl, pulling the collar of his cloak out of her hands. He asked the girl to speak to him informally from now on. Would a lady say "you" to a butler? Killian realized that she would be laughed at if she heard it. Ah, he was right. Ayla covered her mouth with her hands in confusion. Taking the girl's hand, Killian reminded her that she wanted to discuss a lot of her problems with him. "Have you forgotten that you're sailing in the same boat with me?" he asked, and tilted his head toward Ayla's hand for a kiss. Ayla abruptly took her hand away and looked sternly at the man. Then she asked Sophia, who was still here, to go out for a moment. The maid sobbed aloud, suggesting that her mistress had come to hate her. Ayla tried to explain that it wasn't about that at all. However, Sophia only said that even if other people call Madame a witch, she would always remain on her side. Killian just listened to it all, and just by his eyes alone it was clear what he was thinking at that moment. "I guess I hadn't noticed it, but apparently witch and silly have become synonymous," Killian said suddenly. He looked at Sophia with an intimidating stare. Oh, this man, unlike Ayla, wasn't going to turn a blind eye to her insolence. Ayla froze in place, worried about what Killian was going to do. The man noticed Ayla's concern and said, "You make people say the same thing to you." Killian then added, "Aren't you and I in the same boat? But you keep crying and saying you'll solve everything alone. Don't you trust me at all?" Saying that, the man looked at the maid who was under the influence of magic and asked what her name was. "Sophia Beryl," the maid replied. Killian remarked that the name meant wisdom. The girl mechanically replied that it was the name her father had given her, that she should always be sensible. "But you don't seem very pleased with your name?" asked Killian. The maid squealed, saying that her father had better give her money and not talk such nonsense. Ayla shuddered at her maid's harsh words. The lady looked at Sophia with surprise as she continued to speak indignantly about her father. She said that her father felt it was his duty to distribute all the family's property to the poor, and Sophia was left without any aristocratic privileges. Sophia freely showed one of the sides of herself that she had continued to hide until now. And saying all that, she looked incredibly happy. That was Killian's personal ability he was talking about. As it turned out, Sophia wanted to earn money, so she came here from that ugly shack. After talking about her father, Sophia, still under the spell, turned her attention to Ayla. The maid started yelling about how it had been so hard for her to try to please Mistress all this time. She even called Ayla an idle wench who changed her mood 100 times a day. Sophia also remembered that unless the prince looked at the mistress, she took out all her anger on her. The girl did not control herself and said that she couldn't do anything about the fact that the prince hated Ayla because she was just a stone with a beautiful face. And yet, thanks to you, I've been satisfying a lot of my desires. Thank you for believing in my deception, Sophia confessed, and covered her mouth with her hand in horror. She understood everything she was saying, but she couldn't stop this stream of confessions. The maid's mouth, contrary to reason, which commanded silence, spoke of the young mistress being of a different level from the other ladies, so she easily believed the nonsense Sophia was telling her about not wearing the same dress twice. Sophia even dared to call Madame a fool. Ayla was shocked by everything she heard. Killian looked at her reaction with interest. Swallowing her saliva, Ayla continued to listen patiently to what else the maid would confess to her. Sophia admitted that she could take back everything that had only been used once. However, it pissed her off that her mistress wasn't even looking at her once favorite outfits lately. "You must order this season's dresses as soon as possible, for only then will I—" Sophia was unable to finish what she had started, for she was interrupted by Killian, saying that now the mistress could fulfill whatever the girl wished. What was he talking about? Ayla looked at the mage with a puzzled expression. Sophia, on the other hand, with crazy eyes, still under the influence of magic, admitted that she really liked that sapphire necklace that Mistress had worn last time. What about that dainty black pearl necklace like those worn by noble ladies and the diamond hair ornament you wore at the last ball? Sophia excitedly grabbed her mistress's hand. Ayla was tired of hearing all this. The mercantile maid couldn't stop listing all the things she secretly dreamed of and envied, but Ayla jerked her hand out of her grasp. Killian wondered ironically what Ayla would do now. The girl wasn't sure she could do anything in this situation. However, the magician emphasized that in any case, all decisions would have to be made by Ayla herself. Ayla didn't even want to talk to Sophia after saying that, but she was only deceiving Ayla, who was in the affair. She, like Miranda Humphrey, had no personal animosity toward Sophia. Yes, even after becoming the villainous Ayla, the girl was still the same fearful Miranda Humphrey. Miranda wasn't afraid of being used. She was only afraid of being hated. Her fear of rejecting people was because she was simply afraid of being alone. Oh, how Ayla wanted to run away now, just as she had done so many times before. Now, however, her head was filled to the brim with thoughts of hiding from everything again, just like before. "Oh, are you scared? There's nothing to be afraid of," Killian calmly stated when he saw the confusion on Ayla's face. "After all, you have nothing," he added with a smile, leaning closer to the girl. He emphasized that Ayla had no interest from her family, no love, no friends, nothing. These words stabbed into Ayla's heart like arrows, but unfortunately, Killian was right. The mage then explained that Ayla could just do what she wanted without fear of interference. "After all, you have nothing to lose," he repeated again. Ah, how soothing that sounded. Pointing his finger at Sophia, Killian asked if Ayla liked her or not. What kind of separation method is this? I'm not even a child, Ayla thought. But she admitted aloud that she didn't like Sophia, of course. To the question why, she had only one answer, because the maid wanted to use the mistress for her own gain. Killian offered Ayla 2 options to choose from. The first was to give Sophia back everything 100-fold and not even give her a chance to show her courage again. The second was that if there was no way to improve the situation, you could remove her forever from this world. Having voiced his options, Killian smiled wickedly. He looked at Ayla expectantly, wondering which answer the girl would choose. Difficult. It's a test with answer choices. Pick one, the mage insisted. Ayla, on the other hand, wished she'd just said she'd kick her out. Still, killing was a bit too much, so, bowing her head doomedly, the girl chose the first option. Killian seemed to be satisfied with this choice and promised to punish the maid for her sins later. But first he asked Ayla to promise not to breed any more dogs that tear their master apart. The girl was surprised by such words of the magician. Killian suddenly reached his hands toward her face. Ayla swallowed nervously. He jokingly stretched the girl's cheeks and told her to repeat everything he had just said. Ayla obeyed and promised that she would never again breed a dog that ripped apart its master. Don't breed for anything or I'll swear, the mage added. Master-tearing dogs. How appropriate such an allegory was in Killian's words. Ayla, of all people, understood the meaning of those words. The girl thought for a moment. Ayla and Miranda Humphrey lived very different lives as a villain and a naive, silly girl. However, the environment they grew up in was very similar. After all, neither of them had a single normal person nearby. It seems you have something to say, Killian said suddenly, distracting Ayla from her musings. Come on, the mage said, and snapped his fingers right in front of Sophia's face. The maid came out of her bewitched state. Her eyes read shock and fear. The girl looked at her distressed mistress and slapped her face with both hands, covering her mouth. Except that it didn't make sense anymore. All the secret was out, and all the words had already been said. Sophia began to justify that she had in no way meant what she was saying. The girl assumed she was possessed by something at that moment, and there was no way she herself could have said such a thing to her mistress. I think you were able to make up your mind to do it, Ayla remarked calmly. I don't breed dogs that bite their masters, Ayla gleefully told the maid Killian's phrase. Killian whispered something in Ayla's ear, while the maid kept saying that it was all a simple misunderstanding. What on earth is going on? What is Killian whispering in mistress's ear? Ayla listened enthusiastically. This man sometimes said the right things at the right time. Sophia fell to her knees and turned to her mistress again. Her eyes were full of despair and fear. Ayla asked if Sophia really thought she hadn't realized she'd been stealing from her. Ayla explained that she only turned a blind eye because she saw the maid trying her best to please mistress. But for some reason, all of a sudden Sophia decided to ignore mistress. Ayla also added that she would not rest even if Sophia slit her wrist now. However, in memory of their affection for each other, Ayla decided to give the maid one last chance. Meanwhile, Killian continued to whisper something to mistress. The girl smiled. She understood everything Killian was telling her and decided to follow his advice. Ayla ordered the maid to obey, to sit quietly and wait for her mistress to come for her. Sophia didn't look like herself. Her face was contorted with a grimace of fear because she didn't know what awaited her for all the things she had done. Soon the guards arrived and Ayla ordered them to take Sophia to the underground prison. The guards took the girl under their arms and followed their mistress's orders. Sophia, however, was screaming that her mistress could not do that to her, while reproaching Ayla for having wasted her life on her. What an unusual feeling Ayla experienced. For the first time in her entire life, she felt something like this. The large door slammed loudly behind the guards. As the door slammed shut, Ayla waved goodbye in relief. At that moment, Killian walked over. He said that he didn't pay attention to Ayla's fear of him, because it was obvious. However, what was strange to him was the way the mistress was shaking in front of her maid. Where did the defiant girl cursing God go? The mage asked with a sneer. God, it seemed to Ayla that she was no longer able to avoid answering that question, but she also couldn't say that she'd written the novel. I came here from another world, Ayla blurted out suddenly. I knew it! Killian wasn't surprised. Ayla didn't understand how he could know that. Killian explained that he could tell that from head to toe that there was not a trace of a high-ranking lady in the girl. Ayla wondered aloud if she really did seem that suspicious. The mage confirmed. Ayla admitted that she didn't come here of her own free will. One day she woke up and found herself in Ayla's body. Killian saw signs of transmigration in Ayla's story. Now it was clear to him why her whole body was enveloped in reserve energy. The mage wondered where the true mistress of this body had gone. Ayla replied thoughtfully that she couldn't know. Though, come to think of it, a god couldn't just throw away a living soul and put Miranda in her body. Could it be that Ayla's soul had some kind of problem? The girl seems to have found some very important clue. Killian started by asking Ayla to tell him everything she knew. The girl recognized that she might be stupid, as Killian put it. However, the original mistress of this body, Ayla, is a villain. The girl emphasized that if she doesn't act like a villain, in her opinion, the noose will start working again. Ayla managed to notice that Killian was very guessing, so it would be better to lie to him as little as possible. One must try to skillfully conceal the truth. I had a vision, Ayla came up with on the fly. These words surprised the mage very much. He recalled that Ayla had told him earlier that she hadn't seen anything. The girl quickly clarified that it had just happened when Killian said that she had been thinking about something. Ayla explained that she just didn't immediately realize that it was exactly a vision. First, Ayla told Killian that she had acted like a villain, causing the noose to stop. Then she told him about what happened at the Harvest Festival ball, and also about how everyone respects Charlotte, but shuns Ayla. Killian was thinking about something. For some reason, he seemed happy. He emphasized that if everything was as Ayla said, it meant that the loop she'd mentioned would soon be working again. Killian realized that God wanted Ayla to be the perfect villain. Oh, if he'd known that was Ayla's original destiny. But why Ayla specifically? If he wanted this body to act villainous, why did he choose you out of the vast number of souls? The mage wondered, puzzled. He also noticed that the girl had a completely opposite personality, and she was also a soul from another world. Killian's conclusions alarmed Ayla. I guess he's a little too smart. In her mind, she realized that she had been chosen most likely because she was the writer of this novel. However, she said aloud that she didn't know what the deep meaning of the deity's choice was, because not even a month had passed since she got here. What do you want? Killian asked. The girl simply waved her hands. She wished she could just stop this loop. Killian laughingly remarked that he couldn't use his abilities on one that came here from another world after all. Had he just tried to do something like that? Killian suddenly threw off his robe and stood before the girl in all his glory, saying that he was ready to hear her story. Ayla smilingly replied that she would only speak after he turned off his seduction. Wow. He had already figured out her weakness. Well, I'm not going to interrogate you right now, the mage said condescendingly, adding that he would pretend to fall for her deception. And Killian isn't that simple at all. He already knows that Ayla wasn't just telling the truth. Killian noted mockingly that from what Ayla said, she was playing something of a scapegoat for Charlotte. The villain role, Ayla corrected him indignantly. Killian wondered where Ayla saw the villain here. The man thought the whole thing was illogical. Wasn't Ayla miserable because she was being used in every possible way? The girl countered that even though she was being used, she was still considered a real villain. It seemed the deity wanted her to be treated the same way. She thought about the fact that when Miranda wrote the novel, she was totally on Charlotte's side. And really, it's not like Ayla is the real villain. She's even closer to Cupid in her role. Killian thought the deity was repeating the same day for Ayla's sake, but it seemed it was all for that girl Charlotte. However, I still like those who have been tricked better. After all, it's more fun, the mage summarized and stroked Ayla's head encouragingly. What kind of taste does this man have? Become a sacrificial sheep forced to pretend to be a villain and take everything she owns from this Charlotte. If that's what the deity wants you to do, Killian suggested suddenly. Killian thought that Ayla might just become a real villain, so that no one else, not even the deity himself, could turn the girl into a sacrificial sheep or a scapegoat. Ayla assumed that if that was the case, her value to the deity would change. Killian emphasized that if a deity determines her worth, then Ayla can take everything she has away from Charlotte. By the word everything, the magician meant wealth, power, honor, a man, absolutely everything. Killian thought that then the value of that girl would simply disappear instead of Ayla. It was just like the Cinderella fairy tales Miranda had read in her distant childhood. Perhaps, when she watched how villains were punished and good heroes were praised in them, the girl developed a certain stereotype in the future. And this stereotype was so strengthened that she could not even think about the complete victory of the villain over the main heroine. But because it was originally just an ordinary novel, the villain is not the main character. Is it possible to take away the protagonist's spot? And what if it was the main character taking away the protagonist's spot? Ayla figured out that she had to act like a villain, but no one said you couldn't be the main character. Perhaps she will still be able to stop the noose and survive. Maybe things will change. Ayla could have become more honest and tougher than she is now. She could start doing what she wants to do. But how? Killian seemed to consider the girl's worries and said that he would help her. With these words, he reached out to the laces on the girl's corset. This man could help Ayla make it so that she could make everyone fall at her feet and confidently step forward on her own. Killian untied the lace on her corset, saying that Ayla could henceforth ignore anything that made her uncomfortable and anything she didn't like. He explained that in his world, a girl is able to get rid of what she doesn't want to do. Killian promised that everything would be decided on Ayla's word alone. It will happen because he can make it so. The man also added that the girl wouldn't have the option of running away. Looks like that was predetermined from the start. Yes, now Ayla will have to continue to face the problem rather than run away. If she needs to become a villain, she needs to take the place of the main character and become not just a baddie, but a real villain. That was the advice of the real villain, the same one who declared that he could despise the deity. Who could resist the devil's seduction? Ayla couldn't do it alone, but she thought she could do it with Killian. "Please make me a fiend," she asked the mage firmly. The man smiled smugly. "With pleasure," he said, and gallantly kneeling down, he kissed the girl's hand. Evening shrouded the Mertenzia estate in a dark blanket. A lot of things happened. Once free from Falangay's noose, Ayla was found by the sorcerer Killian and was in danger. Soon they made an agreement, with the girl's life at stake. The very existence of this man and meeting Ayla could in no way be reflected in real history. Oh yes, that's not all. It should not be forgotten that Ayla chased away Sophia, who had a role to play in the novel. Now Ayla was worried about whether everything would be all right. At dinner at the manor, she questioned Killian if tomorrow would ever come. The girl was worried about the noose not coming back again. Although the deity controls time, there must be a limit to everything. Perhaps it is only capable of looping a limited period of time. According to Killian and Ayla's assumptions, the loop is only activated when Ayla interferes with the course of the novel's story. If you think about that day in Falangay when Ayla wounded that maid, that moment was the first manifestation of Ayla's villainy in the novel Mistress Lily. This means that since Ayla started acting before her first moment of appearance, namely the Harvest Festival Ball, her fate could change. For days, Ayla had been thinking about all this, and now as she bathed, she was thinking the same thing as usual. The maids were happily whirling around the mistress and delighted to see her so energetic again. The girls asked Ayla to be strong, saying that men were not the most important thing in life. Ayla, in turn, was surprised that the maids could talk to her so easily, even though they had been afraid to say a word before. One maid looked guiltily at the mistress and explained that it just seemed to them that she had been much more affectionate lately. The second, however, said that they had heard from Dobiella as if she had wounded her forehead herself, and the mistress had merely wiped her blood away. Trying on Ayla's dress, the girls expressed the thought that it would be nice if Dobiella were here now too. The maid said she had a flair for this sort of thing. Ayla also learned from the maids that Dobiella had worked in a sewing shop before coming here. This information surprised the lady very much. Killian was already here too. He was standing against the wall, thinking about something. Ayla looked at him and wanted to ask him something. The girl asked Killian why he wasn't wearing a cape today, mentioning that he had hastily thrown one on during Sophia's visit, but now he was only in a suit. Killian explained that people with innate magical abilities constantly attract bad luck. Just by showing their outward appearance, such people doom themselves to a flood of misfortune. The man suddenly and unexpectedly undid the top buttons on his shirt. He admitted that he had been covering his body with a cape that restrained magic. "But I have plenty of alternatives to replace her," he said and opened his shirt, exposing part of his chest. Wow, there was a snake tattooed on his body, and Ayla noticed with great surprise that the snake moved. "What kind of spell is that?" she wondered, stunned. Killian buttoned up his clothes and explained that this was the kind of spell that allowed a sorcerer to completely strip himself of magic. The man added that if the magic disappeared even from the depths of the body, it would begin to absorb life energy. Ayla reached out her hand to Killian. The mage emphasized that it was the most he could do if he didn't want to cause the mutilation of the people around him. Ayla touched Killian's arm. She wondered if Killian was okay. It seemed as if he was in his own thoughts and didn't hear Ayla's words at all. It seemed to be the case, though. Killian interjected what the girl had just said, explaining that he hadn't heard, and maybe it was from the fact that he was getting older. The girl asked how old he was, thinking Killian was just joking. The man thought for a moment and replied that he was over 500 years old. Ayla said fearfully that it wasn't funny at all, but Killian just handed her some kind of a roll and told the girl to take a better look at it. Killian advised that this is Mistress's schedule, and from now on her daily rise will be at 5 in the morning. Instead of an imprisoned maid, the bathing would now be assisted by maids assigned to it. Ayla took a quick look at the schedule and asked if she had to follow it every day. The girl was lazy. Killian urged her to agree, or he would have to take care of it personally. But in this case, a man as indelicate as he was could hurt the mistress. The girl sighed sadly. Would her dream of a rich, unemployed life be ruined just like that? Killian, as if reading her mind again, said that Ayla could dream as much as she wanted. Killian took the hint that, unlike the deity, he would not insist on his chosen methods. Ayla had reason to wonder. Given that the girl was branded a villain by divine will, it might seem that Killian was controlling her too. However, Ayla chose this path herself. Killian could only point out the direction, but the girl had to make all decisions on her own. "If you want something, order it," the man said, and touched his fingers to the quill that was in Ayla's hands. The tip of the feather almost touched the girl's lips. "I look forward to it," Killian pronounced. Ayla was the only person beyond his abilities. Like a blank sheet of paper right now. Killian was curious to see what color this leaf would turn once he achieved his goals. After all this, Killian said the following: "And for a bad reputation, public interest is important. You must use it, and at the ball capture the public attention originally intended for Charlotte. Have you heard of the bully and kitten effect on a rainy day? This scene often appears in stories about pure and sincere love. The protagonist meets a bully feeding and protecting a kitten from the rain and falls in love with him. In other words, what if the villainous Ayla is on much better behavior than before?